So data breach, if you breach the GDPR, you are likely to, depending on the size of the breach, you're likely to attract the attention of the Information and Commission's Office in the UK or a supervisory authority in another European company. And the definition of data breach is this, and it could be just the accidental, and this is one of the reasons why staff briefing and education is really important, because an accidental disclosure, unauthorized disclosure information is a data breach. If you unlawfully destruct, so if you intentionally destruct data, it's a breach, or the loss of. So loss of, for example, if your system goes down and you have no backup, so if your hard drive on your computer corrupts and you've not backed up your data and you've lost it, you've just breached against the law. If you alter the data without any authority, and if you disclose the data in an unauthorized way, or even access it when you're not supposed to, you're breaching the Data Protection Act, or the GDPR. There was an example of in the National Health Service where in a nursing ward, a nurse approached a filing cabinet full of medical records, and because she worked there, she had every reason to go to that cabinet, and she opened the drawer and she started to thumb through the files in just out of curiosity to look at data. At the point she started to do that, she was actually breaching, because although she had authority to go to the filing cabinet and open it, and if she were to take out a specific piece of data for the purposes of a job, that would have been fine. But as soon as she started to get curious to see what else was in there, she was breaching the GDPR, the Data Protection Act, as is at the moment. So it's very, very important when we handle data, we understand what we should be doing with it, what we're supposed to be doing with it, and what we shouldn't be doing with it. And so do I have to report a breach? Under the GDPR, breach reporting is mandatory, especially in cases where the data breach is likely to result in the risk of an individual's rights and freedoms. Now, by and large, small-scale breaches, you won't be reporting to the ICO. But if there is a large breach, or if that breach contains high-risk data or special category data, then you have to report it to the supervisory authority within 72 hours. And if it's high risk, so for example, previous cases such as TalkTalk, where people's account records were hacked, you must be considering notifying those data subjects as soon as possible. I think those previous breaches, TalkTalk in particular, there was months before the data subject was told that a breach had occurred. In the future, that won't happen. They have a duty and obligation under the law to tell data subjects as soon as possible. This also will trigger something called an incident response plan. So there needs to be a process in place which is there to help identify breaches, to report a breach to the appropriate individual within the company, which will then trigger a series of actions around trying to limit breach, trying to shore up the breach and stop it, getting to understand the impact of that breach, why it's occurred, and then learning the lesson of that breach and putting in procedures so that it doesn't happen again. So that's your breach. And these are the sanctions. Data controllers and data processors have joint liability. So data controllers are the first point of contact. So what's happened? Why has it happened? Well, actually, it wasn't me, it was my data processor. Okay, well, let's look at that relationship. Have you issued them with a data processing agreement that tells them what they can be doing, and so they understand their obligations under the GDPR? And then we'll look at the data process to say, well, did you abide by those that agreement? Did you have adequate security? Did you processes? And the ICO would make an assessment as to where that liability rests. But the reality is, there'll still be culpability across both those entities. And data subjects have the right to sue. They can sue for material and non-material damage. So if there's a breach, and even if you didn't suffer any damage, any reputational damage, you didn't lose any money, you can still sue the data controller and processor. And you can do that as an individual, or you can do it in a class action if it's a national large-scale breach. And interestingly enough, under this law, if the statutory authority, so the Information Commissioner's Office, don't take any action, they can be sued as well. And the regulations do not give an upper limit. So if an individual takes their civil case to court, there is no upper limit that a judge can award against the company that breached. But the ICO have powers around administrative fines, and you can see on the slide that the administrative fines are huge. So TalkTalk were fined by the Information Commissioner's Office just under £500,000, which frankly is not a lot of money to a company of that scale. Under the new law, the maximum fine for a tier 1 is 20 million euros, so 17 million quid, or 4% of the previous year's turnover for tier 1 breaches. For a tier 2, which is a lesser offence, it's 10 million euro or 2%. It's still a lot of money. At the moment, the ICO can only levy a fine of 500,000. So you can see how these fines are designed to be persuasive and punitive. And the reality is there are other sanctions available. So at the moment, the ICO are saying, look, no, it's really in all of their interests that everybody becomes compliant. So we're not going to be waving a big stick from the 25th. We're going to be offering some carrots and support and some warm noises, and we're going to help you on your journey. Reality is they will start to regulate from the 25th. What they can do is offer warning and advice. They can actually, before they fine you, they can stop your processing. To stop your processing, it means immediately you have to stop using the data on your systems. You can't use your client data. You can't use any of the data you've collected to conduct business. The reality is you become dead in the water until you've taken corrective actions. To me, being unable to trade is probably damaging and taken on a fine. So you can see that it's really, really important that we do what we can to make sure PSC is in a really good place and is compliant.